He stood motionless in the middle of the whiteout, a German shepherd in a torn canine vest, ice clinging to his fur, one paw bleeding into the snow. He wasn't just lost in the storm. He had lost his partner. Somewhere behind him, the mountains swallowed the sound of sirens. Somewhere ahead, a single cabin window glowed faintly through the blizzard, the last light in Iron Creek. Inside that cabin lived a man who had already buried one canine partner with his own hands. Jack Callahan swore he would never open his heart, or his door, to another working dog again. But when the wind shifted and the shepherd collapsed against his porch, he had to decide: open the door and risk reliving the worst night of his life, or turn away and let the storm finish what fate had started. What happened next in that Colorado blizzard would prove one thing: sometimes the partner you rescue is the one sent to rescue you. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your state or country in the comments below. And if you believe no soldier, human or canine, should ever stand alone in the cold, hit that subscribe button. Because this isn't just a story about survival. It's about second watches, second chances, and the kind of loyalty that refuses to die. The storm over Iron Creek didn't whisper, it roared. Iron Creek, Colorado, disappeared in less than an hour. The storm rolled down from the Rockies like a collapsing sky, swallowing the pine-lined streets, the gas station on Main, the frozen creek that gave the town its name. Wind drove the snow sideways, turning headlights into useless halos. By nightfall, the world beyond a few feet was simply gone. High above town, where the road narrowed into a single unplowed ribbon of white, a solitary cabin clung to the mountainside. Jack Callahan preferred it that way. At 52, Jack was built like a man who had spent his life outdoors. Broad-shouldered, thick through the chest, his strength not flashy, but durable. His dark hair had gone mostly gray at the temples, cropped short in a habit he never abandoned after 25 years on the force. A jagged scar ran from beneath his left ear down toward his collarbone, pale against weathered skin. His face carried the permanent lines of someone who had learned to expect the worst and prepare for it quietly. He moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, checking the storm shutters one final time. The wood stove crackled behind him, casting orange light across the log walls. Mounted above the mantel was a framed photograph he rarely looked at directly. A younger version of Jack knelt in the picture, one arm wrapped around a powerful German shepherd, with alert amber eyes and a proud black and tan coat. The dog wore a canine harness. The name beneath the photo read, Ranger, Iron Creek Police Department. Jack paused as the wind slammed into the cabin again. The sound had a way of echoing, too sharp, too sudden. For a split second it wasn't wind he heard. It was a rifle crack bouncing off concrete alleyways. It was dust, heat, blood. He exhaled slowly and turned away from the photograph. Ranger had died 8 years ago during a warehouse pursuit. A suspect had doubled back with a concealed handgun. Ranger didn't hesitate. He launched. The bullet meant for Jack struck the dog instead. Jack had carried him out. He still remembered the weight. After the funeral, after the folded flag, after the department offered him another canine prospect, Jack declined. He retired the following year, moved up to the ridge, built walls out of wood in silence. He told himself he preferred the quiet. The emergency weather radio crackled from the kitchen counter. All residents advised to shelter in place. Sheriff's office confirms one K9 unit missing during pursuit of burglary suspects near mile marker 12. Repeat, K9 missing in the storm. Search operations suspended until visibility improves. Jack stiffened. He crossed the room and turned up the volume. Sheriff Megan Foster advises civilians not to attempt independent search. Suspects believed to be armed and possibly sheltering in wooded areas north of town. He switched it off. The cabin fell back into wind and firelight. Megan Foster. Jack had known her since she was a kid running around the old training yard, watching the K9 handlers work. Now she was sheriff, the first woman ever elected in Iron Creek County. Megan Foster was 38, tall and lean, with a runner's build and sharp hazel eyes that missed very little. Her blonde hair was usually pulled into a tight ponytail beneath her hat. She carried herself with a steady, controlled confidence that came from growing up in a law enforcement family and having to prove, twice as hard, that she belonged in charge. She had once told Jack that Ranger was the reason she chose policing over law school. Now one of her dogs was missing. Jack stared at the dark window. "Not my problem," he muttered. Outside, the storm intensified. 3 miles downslope, near a tree line bent nearly horizontal from the wind, a German shepherd struggled through drifts nearly chest-high. Atlas was 4 years old, male, bred from a long line of working dogs. His coat was darker than Ranger's had been, more sable than tan, thick with ice clinging along his underbelly. His vest, black nylon stamped K9, Iron Creek PD, was torn along one strap. His right forepaw bled lightly where ice had cut the pad. He had lost visual contact with his handler an hour earlier, when gunfire cracked through the trees and the storm swallowed everything in white noise. Atlas did not panic. K9 training burned deeper than fear. Find shelter, regroup, continue. His handler's last command still echoed in his ears. Track. He had tracked. He had followed the scent of adrenaline and cold metal into the woods. Now, the scent was gone. But another scent, faint, carried by the wind, cut through the storm. Smoke, heat, human. Atlas angled uphill. Jack was halfway to his bedroom when he heard it. A faint scrape. He froze. The wind battered the cabin relentlessly, but this was different. Closer. Lower. Another sound followed. A weak, dragging scratch against wood. Jack moved toward the front door slowly, every old instinct returning to the surface. He didn't reach for a weapon, not yet. He leaned toward the door, listening. Scratch. Not random. Deliberate. His jaw tightened. He unlocked the deadbolt but didn't open it. Instead, he flicked on the exterior floodlight. Through the frosted glass pane, he saw movement. A shape pressed against the door. He pulled it open 2 inches against the wind. The storm exploded inward in a blast of ice and snow, and there he stood, a German shepherd. Large, exhausted, standing on shaking legs. The dog's ears were half lowered, not in submission, but fatigue. Ice crusted along his whiskers. His chest rose and fell in heavy pulls. One paw hovered slightly off the ground. Jack's eyes dropped to the vest. K9, Iron Creek PD. The tag clipped to the collar clinked faintly against metal. Atlas. Jack's throat tightened. The dog did not bark. He did not whine. He simply stood there, looking directly at Jack, not begging, not demanding, waiting for a command. Behind Atlas, the forest was a void of white violence. Jack's mind split in two. Protocol. Notify sheriff. Secure animal. Do not get attached. Memory. Ranger collapsing into his arms. "I can't do this again," Jack whispered. The dog's legs trembled harder. For a second, Atlas swayed. Then he collapsed forward onto the porch. That decided it. Jack swore under his breath and yanked the door wide open. "Get inside!" Atlas dragged himself over the threshold, paws scraping on hardwood. The moment the door slammed shut, the cabin swallowed the storm's roar into muffled fury. The dog remained on the floor, sides heaving. Up close, Jack saw the condition clearly. Minor lacerations, ice-packed fur, early hypothermia setting in. He knelt. Slowly. Atlas's head lifted weakly. His eyes were a deep amber, focused, alert despite exhaustion. He did not growl. Jack extended a hand. "Easy." Atlas sniffed once, then allowed it. Jack exhaled. "Damn it," he muttered. He moved with quiet competence, the old muscle memory returning. Towel, warm water, check paws. No fractures, no bullet wounds, just cold and fatigue. The dog endured it all without resistance. "You're trained well," Jack murmured. Atlas's ears twitched at the tone, as if cataloging the voice. When Jack finished drying him, he placed a blanket near the stove. Atlas did not lie down immediately. Instead, he turned his head toward the door, listening, guarding. Jack followed his gaze. "You're off duty," he said quietly. Atlas finally lowered himself to the floor. Jack stood there longer than he meant to. The cabin felt different now, occupied, alive. The radio crackled again faintly from the counter. He looked at it, then at the dog. "I'll call it in," he said. But he didn't move. Outside, the storm howled across Iron Creek, burying roads and secrets alike. Inside the cabin on the ridge, a retired officer who swore he would never partner with another K9 again stood staring at the firelight reflecting in amber eyes. And for the first time in 8 years, the silence didn't feel empty. The storm did not ease overnight. It pressed harder against the mountain, rattling the cabin windows with a steady, hollow thud that echoed through the beams. Snow had sealed the lower half of the porch door by morning, and the world beyond the glass was nothing but white motion and shadow. Inside, the fire burned low and steady. Atlas lay on the braided rug near the stove, but not fully at rest. Even in sleep, his body remained aligned toward the front windows. One ear flicked at every shift of wind. His breathing had deepened since the night before, stronger now, but there was a tension beneath the surface, discipline layered over exhaustion. Jack stood in the kitchen corner, sleeves rolled, heating water in a dented metal pot. In daylight, Atlas looked less like a stray survivor and more like what he was, a trained canine in peak physical condition, temporarily brought low by the storm. He was large, nearly 80 pounds of muscle under thick sable fur, long-legged, lean in the hips, the kind of build bred for endurance tracking rather than brute force. A narrow white scar ran along his right shoulder, old and clean. His eyes, when open, were sharp and evaluating. Jack crouched beside him with a towel. "Let's see that paw again," he muttered. Atlas's head lifted instantly, not startled, alert. His gaze locked on Jack's face, studying tone and posture. When Jack touched the injured paw, the dog stiffened but did not pull away. No snapping, no warning growl, just a controlled breath through clenched jaws. "You're holding back," Jack observed quietly. "Good." He cleaned the cut more thoroughly this time. Minor. It would heal. Atlas shifted once the bandage was secure, then, without prompting, rose to his feet and moved toward the window again. He planted himself beside it, chest squared, tail low but steady, watching. "You're off shift," Jack said again, but softer this time. Atlas ignored him. The wind howled, and something in the pitch changed. A high, cracking whistle that tore across the ridge. Jack froze. For half a second, he wasn't in Colorado. He was back inside the warehouse, concrete walls amplifying a gunshot into a concussive snap. Ranger launching forward. The smell of cordite and blood mixing in the heat. Jack's hand tightened involuntarily on the counter edge. His breath shortened, the present blurred. The whistle became a rifle crack in his mind. He heard himself shouting, heard Ranger's sharp yelp. He felt the weight again, 50 pounds heavier in death than in life. Atlas moved. The dog crossed the room in 3 quiet strides and stopped directly in front of Jack, not touching him, not whining. Just standing there, blocking his line of sight to the window, grounding. Jack blinked. The cabin returned. Firelight, wind, wood smoke. He exhaled slowly. "I'm fine," he said hoarsely. Atlas tilted his head slightly, reading him, then returned to his post by the window. Jack stared at the dog's back. "You don't even know what you're doing, do you?" he murmured. But Atlas did know something. His training had carved responses into him deeper than thought. He was built to detect instability, changes in breathing, muscle tension, adrenaline spikes. He had been paired with Officer Daniel Ruiz, 29 years old, dark-haired, athletic, quick to laugh but serious in uniform. Ruiz had handled Atlas since he was 10 weeks old, had slept on the training kennel floor during certification week just to build trust. Ruiz was still out there somewhere in the storm, and Atlas knew it. Down in Iron Creek, the sheriff's office was running on coffee and adrenaline. Sheriff Megan Foster stood at the center of the operations room, sleeves rolled above her elbows, radio clipped at her shoulder. She was tall, just under 6 feet, with a runner's posture and steady, controlled movements. Her hazel eyes were sharp, but there were dark crescents beneath them from lack of sleep. Leadership sat naturally on her, but not easily. Every decision carried weight. Being the first female sheriff in the county had not been ceremonial. It had been earned the hard way. Megan had grown up watching her father wear the badge, watching men twice her size question her ambition. She learned early that calm was stronger than volume. A large county map was pinned to the wall behind her, dotted with colored markers. Deputy Aaron Mills stood nearby, mid-30s, broad-built, red beard thick against pale winter skin. Practical, loyal, but visibly anxious. "We lost visual on Ruiz at 0100, he said. Last GPS ping from Atlas's vest was near mile marker 12, before signal died. Megan nodded once. Storm interference, or terrain. We're pulling thermal drones once wind drops below 30. She studied the map again. Any sign of the suspects? Negative, but we got a call from St. Vincent Medical Supply. They had motion alarms trip around midnight before the power flickered. Megan's jaw tightened. The narcotics wing? Yes, ma'am. Oxycodone inventory. The storm wasn't just weather. It was cover. She thought briefly of Ranger, how she used to sneak him treats during training sessions when Jack wasn't looking. Ranger had tolerated her as a teenager with indulgent patience. When he died, she attended the memorial in uniform, even though she hadn't yet graduated the academy. That day cemented something in her. No canine would be forgotten under her watch. She looked at the deputies. Atlas doesn't abandon track. If he broke off, it was forced. Ruiz wouldn't call him back unless something went wrong. Her voice steadied. We find both of them. Back at the cabin, Atlas stiffened. A sound had reached him through wind and wall. Jack noticed immediately. The dog's ears locked forward, his body angled toward the north tree line. What is it? Jack asked, moving closer. Atlas let out a low, controlled rumble, not aggression. Notification. Jack stepped toward the window and wiped condensation with his sleeve. Visibility was near zero. You hear something I don't. Atlas remained fixed, muscles taut. The dog was not panicked, he was assessing. Jack felt a familiar sensation in his chest. Adrenaline sharpened into clarity. He had missed this, not the violence, but the purpose. Atlas suddenly shifted weight and glanced back at Jack, briefly, then back to the window. A cue. You see it too. Jack swallowed. I told myself I was done, he muttered. The wind howled again, but this time he did not flinch. Instead, he moved to the radio and turned it on. Static crackled. Sheriff Foster requesting any civilians near North Ridge report unusual movement. Jack's gaze drifted to Atlas. The dog had not moved from his post since dawn, guarding, waiting, for a command that hadn't come. Jack looked at the old photograph above the mantel. Ranger frozen mid-leap in a training shot, muscles coiled, eyes fierce and loyal. He felt the old grief rise, but it didn't crush him this time. It stood beside him. Atlas shifted again, as if reminding him of the present. Jack rubbed a hand down his face. I can't lose another one, he said quietly, more to himself than to the dog. Atlas's ears flicked at the tone. The statement wasn't defiance, it was fear, and for the first time in years, Jack recognized it as such. He turned off the radio but didn't step away from it. Outside, somewhere in the buried forest, suspects hid beneath the storm. Down in town, a sheriff fought pressure from media and county officials questioning her command decisions. In the cabin on the ridge, a retired officer stood beside a canine who refused to stand down. Atlas remained at the window, still on watch, and Jack, despite everything he had promised himself, did not tell him to move. The storm weakened by late afternoon, not into calm, but into something thinner. Wind no longer screaming, just dragging snow across the ridge in long white sheets. Visibility improved enough to separate tree from sky. The world remained buried, but shapes began to return. Atlas had not left the window all morning. Twice he had paced the perimeter of the cabin interior, nose lifted, inhaling slowly, as if sorting layers of scent trapped in wood and air. Each time he returned to the north-facing glass, waiting. Jack watched him from the table, a mug of untouched coffee cooling near his hand. The dog's posture had changed. Not exhaustion now, purpose. You're catching something, Jack said quietly. Atlas's ears angled backward at the voice, but remained alert. His nostrils flared. A low rumble vibrated in his chest. Jack moved to the door and opened it a few inches. The cold hit immediately, sharper now that the wind had settled. The air carried scent more cleanly. Atlas stepped forward without hesitation. Hold, Jack said automatically. The command slipped out before he could stop it. Atlas froze mid-stride. Jack stared at him. Perfect compliance. No leash, no reinforcement, just training embedded deep. Jack swallowed. Go! Atlas moved onto the porch and lowered his head to the snow. The top layer was windswept and uneven, but beneath it the earlier drift had hardened enough to preserve impressions. Jack stepped carefully behind him. At first he saw nothing but white distortions. Then he noticed it. A depression too narrow to be a snowshoe, too deep for wildlife. The heel cut sharp, toe angled outward. Human. Jack crouched. The tread pattern was unfamiliar, heavy lug sole, not standard issue for deputies. Search and rescue teams wore orange overlays and snowshoes. This print had neither. Atlas followed the line of tracks, nose nearly brushing the surface, zigzagging once to confirm direction before settling into a straight path toward the tree line north of the cabin. "You weren't just looking for shelter," Jack murmured. Atlas did not look back. He was tracking. The path led downslope through a narrow break in the pines, where wind had sculpted the snow thinner between trunks. Jack moved carefully, every old instinct returning. Check corners, scan elevation, listen beyond sight. Halfway down the incline, Atlas stopped abruptly and sniffed at a dark stain near a fallen branch. Jack stepped closer. Blood. Not much, a smear against bark where someone had steadied themselves. "Someone's hurt," Jack said. Atlas's ears flicked. The dog's tail remained level, not high, focused, not excited. They continued another 200 yards until the trees opened onto an old logging access road, long abandoned by the county. At the far end stood a low, metal-sided storage structure, half buried in drift. Rust had eaten at the edges, but the door hung slightly ajar. Jack's pulse slowed, not from calm, but from clarity. Atlas moved toward the structure, but paused 3 feet from the threshold. He glanced at Jack once. Permission. Jack crouched beside him. "Easy." The air near the building carried a different scent. Fuel residue, damp fabric, sweat. Recent. Jack edged forward and pushed the door with the toe of his boot. Inside, darkness, and the stale odor of machinery long removed. Then a sound, a shifting breath, from the back corner. Jack's body tightened. Atlas lowered himself, muscles coiled but waiting. In the shadow, a man leaned against the far wall, one hand pressed to his thigh. Blood had soaked through denim near the upper leg. His coat was heavy canvas, torn at the shoulder. Mid-30s, dark hair matted with snowmelt, stubble along his jaw. His eyes were not wild, just calculating. Evan Pike. Though Jack did not yet know his name, Pike was the kind of man whose anger ran quieter than his voice. He had grown up moving between foster homes across 3 counties, learning early that trust was currency best withheld. Petty theft turned to burglary. Burglary turned to organized narcotics runs. He believed the world owed him something it had never delivered. Now he believed the police dog had cost him his escape. His hand hovered near a revolver on the floor beside him. Atlas saw it. The dog's lips parted slightly, not in a bark, but warning. Jack lifted his hand slowly, stepping into view. "You're bleeding bad." The man's gaze flicked to the dog, then back to Jack. "Call him off. He hasn't done anything yet. Call him off." Atlas did not move forward. He did not retreat. He simply stood between Jack and the gun. The man shifted, wincing as his injured leg buckled. Jack assessed quickly, entry wound along the outer thigh, likely from the earlier exchange of gunfire during pursuit. Not fatal, but slowing. "You fire that inside here," Jack said evenly. "The deputies will hear it. They're already looking." The man's jaw tightened. Dog ruined everything. Atlas's ears flicked at tone. Jack's voice dropped a degree colder. "That dog saved someone's life last night." Silence. Wind moved against the metal siding with a low groan. Atlas took 1 step forward, not lunging, not threatening, just closing distance enough to remove the man's confidence. The revolver hand hesitated. Jack seized the moment. He stepped in and kicked the weapon sideways across the concrete. Atlas remained locked on the man's shoulders, reading intent. The man sagged back against the wall. "I need a ride," he muttered. "You need a medic," Jack replied. Atlas's breathing slowed, tracking complete. At the sheriff's office, Megan Foster leaned over a digital terrain map as Deputy Mills adjusted signal filters on a laptop. "Got something," Mills said. Last GPS ping from Atlas's vest triangulated near Callahan Ridge, before total signal loss. Megan straightened. Callahan. She hadn't spoken to Jack in months, but she knew exactly where his cabin sat. "Pull up windrift models," she ordered. Mills complied. She studied the data. If Atlas had continued track before storm interference, that direction aligned with the suspected flight path from St. Vincent's Medical Supply Depot. She thought of Ranger again, how he would plant himself in front of suspects twice his size without hesitation. Atlas had been trained in the same yard. "He didn't break," she said quietly. He followed. Mills glanced up. "You think he's still tracking?" "I know he is." She grabbed her coat. "We're heading to Callahan Ridge." Back at the storage building, Jack stood over the injured man while Atlas maintained a controlled guard position. "You move wrong," Jack said calmly. "He moves faster." The man gave a short, humorless laugh. "Figures." Atlas did not blink. Jack studied the dog. No confusion, no displacement. He wasn't lost in the storm. He had been doing his job. Jack felt something shift inside him. Not grief this time, but recognition. "You weren't wandering," he said softly to Atlas. "You were finishing it." Atlas's tail flicked once. Outside, faint in the distance, came the low rumble of engines climbing the ridge. Jack glanced toward the road. Sirens did not wail in the mountains unless necessary. This approach was controlled. Atlas heard it too. His head turned slightly, confirming direction. But he did not abandon his position over the suspect. Professional. Jack crouched beside him briefly. "Good work," he said, the words coming easier than he expected. Atlas's ears relaxed half an inch. He remained on watch. The storm had not swallowed him. It had delivered him. And Jack, standing inside a rusted shed beside a disciplined canine and a bleeding suspect, understood something clearly for the first time since Ranger fell. This wasn't coincidence. Atlas hadn't come to the cabin to be saved. He had come because the track led there. And Jack, whether he liked it or not, had stepped back onto the line. The sound of engines grew louder. Atlas did not move, still on task, still tracking, until command relieved him. By the third night, the storm had shifted from violent chaos to a grinding siege. The wind no longer screamed, but it carried a steady, low moan that wrapped around the cabin like something patient and waiting. Snow had hardened into crust along the ridge, reflecting the faint moonlight in dull silver sheets. Iron Creek below remained mostly cut off, its roads barely passable despite the plows working through the day. Inside the cabin, Atlas lay near the hearth, but he was not sleeping. Jack noticed it first in the stillness. The dog's breathing was too shallow. His ears angled not toward the fire, not toward Jack, but toward the rear wall facing the tree line. Every few seconds, his nose twitched. Jack set down the rag he had been using to wipe down the old shotgun, more out of habit than intention. The Remington 870 hadn't been fired in years. He had cleaned it twice annually, never loading it, telling himself it was precaution, not preparation. Atlas rose silently. No bark, no growl, just movement. He crossed to the back door leading toward the narrow driveway carved into the ridge and stood square in front of it, muscles tight, tail low and steady. His head tilted slightly left as if triangulating distance. Jack felt the air change before he heard anything. Then came the sound. A crunch. Not wind-driven snow. Controlled weight. Boots. More than one. Jack's pulse steadied into the familiar cadence of focus. "You're sure?" he murmured. Atlas's lip lifted a fraction. The back door handle shifted once. Tested. Jack moved to the window and cut the interior light with a flick of the switch. The cabin dropped into firelit shadow. Outside, three shapes moved low between trees. Men. The first was tall and narrow-shouldered, moving with restless impatience. He wore a dark parka, hood pulled tight, and carried himself like someone used to pushing first and thinking later. This was Caleb Morrow, 32, wiry, impulsive, recently paroled and already spiraling back into old alliances. He believed boldness covered fear. Behind him came a broader figure, slower, favoring one leg slightly. Evan Pike. He had been treated by deputies after Jack's earlier discovery, but had talked his way into temporary hospital transfer during the chaos of storm logistics. He hadn't stayed long. The third man was younger, barely 25, thin, sharp-faced, with darting eyes. Lucas Hale, a mechanic by trade, drawn into the narcotics theft through debt and misplaced loyalty. He was the least certain of the three. "They'll have fuel," Caleb muttered, voice low but urgent. "Truck up there. Supplies." "And the old man?" Lucas asked. "He won't fight," Caleb replied. Inside, Atlas shifted closer to the door. Jack reached for the shotgun. His hand hesitated only once, briefly, at the memory of Ranger. Then he loaded 2 shells. Outside, Caleb reached the porch. He tried the handle. Locked. He stepped back and motioned toward the side window. Atlas moved first. He lunged forward just enough to slam his body against the door from inside. A controlled, explosive impact that rattled the wood. Caleb recoiled. "What the hell?" A deep, resonant bark erupted from inside the cabin. Not frantic, not wild. A canine warning. Lucas stumbled back. It's the dog. The police dog. Pike's eyes narrowed toward the window. He's in there. Caleb swore and pulled a crowbar from beneath his coat. Inside, Jack stepped into view deliberately, shotgun angled but not aimed directly. You break that window, Jack called out evenly, and you won't make it back to the tree line. Caleb froze. For a split second, no one moved. Then Pike recognized him. Callahan. Jack didn't answer. Atlas stood directly at Jack's left side, slightly forward, exact heel position for engagement. Not crowding, not straining, waiting. Caleb's jaw tightened. We just need the truck. You're not taking it, Jack said calmly. Pike's hand drifted toward his coat. Atlas responded instantly, body lowering, weight shifting, a barely audible growl vibrating through the cabin floorboards. Jack felt the old rhythm click into place. He stepped slightly right. Atlas mirrored left. Perfect offset. Ranger used to do that. Jack's chest tightened, but not from grief, from recognition. Don't, he warned Pike. But Caleb had already moved. He lunged toward the window with the crowbar. The glass shattered inward in a spray of ice and splinters. Atlas launched. He didn't clear the opening. He hit the sill mid-jump, jaws snapping inches from Caleb's forearm. The movement was controlled. Intimidation, not bite. Caleb fell backward into the snow. Lucas swore and bolted toward the trees. Pike stumbled, trying to pivot with his injured leg. Jack stepped forward and fired, not at them, but straight upward through the open air above the porch. The flare shell ignited with a violent hiss, streaking red into the sky. It burst above the ridge in a bloom of crimson light, illuminating the snowfield for miles. Down below, Megan Foster's patrol vehicle crested the lower access road at that exact moment. She saw it instantly. "That's Callahan Ridge," she said sharply. Deputy Mills, driving, nodded. "He's signaling." Megan's jaw set. "Step on it." Back on the porch, Caleb scrambled up and tried to run, but Atlas cleared the doorway this time. The dog's body collided with him mid-stride, taking him down in the snow. No wild mauling, just forceful pinning, jaws clamping onto the heavy sleeve of the parka and driving the man's arm into the drift. Caleb screamed. Lucas vanished between trees. Pike raised his hands. Jack moved forward with steady precision, shotgun leveled now, not shaking. "Face down," he ordered. Pike complied slowly, pain distorting his expression. Atlas held position on Caleb without escalating. Disciplined, measured. Red and blue lights cut through the trees moments later. Sheriff Megan Foster exited the lead cruiser before it fully stopped. Snow crunched beneath her boots as she approached, hand near her sidearm, but eyes assessing first. She was tall in the flashing lights, posture straight, expression controlled but sharp. "Jack," she called. "Two down," he replied. One fled east. Atlas maintained pressure until Megan reached them. "Release," she commanded firmly. Atlas's ears twitched. Jack glanced at her, then nodded once. "Release." Atlas let go immediately and stepped back into heel position beside Jack. Caleb rolled over, clutching his arm, shaken but intact. Deputies moved in quickly, securing Pike and Caleb in cuffs. Megan stepped closer, her gaze resting briefly on Atlas. "He held perimeter?" she asked quietly. Jack nodded. "All of it." She looked at the shattered window, the flare smoke dissipating above the ridge, the disciplined stance of the dog who had not broken posture, even after engagement. "Good boy," she said softly. Atlas's tail gave one restrained thump. Megan turned toward her deputies, voice carrying authority without strain. "Search East Quadrant. Thermal if available. Hale won't get far." Her command tone was crisp, decisive, the kind that eliminated hesitation in others. Mills nodded and relayed instructions without question. Caleb glared up at Jack. "You think this ends it?" "It already did," Jack replied evenly. Megan met Pike's gaze directly. "You picked the wrong ridge." There was no triumph in her voice, just certainty. Within minutes, patrol units fanned out through the trees. Jack stood on the porch, snow settling into the broken frame of his window. Atlas remained beside him, not pacing, not scanning wildly, waiting, still on guard. Megan approached once more. "He protected you," she said. Jack looked down at the dog. Atlas met his gaze briefly, then shifted attention back to the dark forest. "Yes," Jack said quietly. "He did." Megan studied Jack's face, the set of his shoulders, the absence of the old withdrawal she remembered from years ago. You stepped back in, she observed. Didn't have much choice. She allowed herself the smallest smile. That's usually how it starts. Deputies returned 10 minutes later. Lucas Hale located, Mills called out. Apprehended near the lower tree line. Megan exhaled once, tension releasing. All suspects in custody. Atlas's posture eased slightly. Not fully, but enough. The ridge fell back into controlled quiet. Sirens dimmed, boots crunching, radios crackling. Jack looked at the dog again. You stayed, he said softly. Atlas blinked. The storm had not claimed him. The criminals had not broken him. And tonight, in the flare-lit snow outside a battered mountain cabin, Atlas had done exactly what he was trained to do. Protect. The deputies escorted the suspects toward the cruisers. Megan gave one final glance at the broken window and then at Jack. We'll get a unit up here to help board that. Jack nodded. Atlas remained at heel. Mission complete. Morning arrived pale and brittle over Iron Creek. The storm had finally broken apart, leaving behind a sky scrubbed thin and blue, the snowfields glittering under a hard winter sun. Smoke rose straight from chimneys now, instead of whipping sideways. The town below had begun to move again, slowly, cautiously, like a body testing bruised limbs after impact. Jack stood on his porch, hammer in hand, repairing the plywood that had sealed the broken window through the night. His movements were efficient, steady, the way they had been during his years on the force. Atlas sat 3 feet behind him, square posture, eyes scanning the tree line despite the daylight calm. He hadn't relaxed since the arrest. He hadn't wandered. He hadn't strayed more than a few steps from the cabin. A county SUV crunched up the ridge road shortly before noon. Sheriff Megan Foster stepped out alone this time. She removed her hat as she approached. In daylight, without flashing lights, she looked younger than her command presence suggested. Mid-30s, strong build, dark hair pulled into a tight, low ponytail. There was a steadiness to her posture that hadn't existed when she first took office. The confrontation 2 nights ago had hardened something into place. Behind her vehicle sat a transport kennel. Atlas noticed it immediately. His ears rose. Jack noticed Atlas noticing. Megan climbed the porch steps and gave Jack a long look. They're requesting him back. Jack didn't respond immediately. Unit wants Atlas returned to active duty, she continued. Paperwork's already in motion. Jack set the hammer down. Atlas stood slowly. Not excited, not anxious, just alert. He cleared medically? Jack asked. Minor muscle strain, some superficial bruising. Megan glanced at the dog. He's fit. The word hung between them. Fit. Jack wiped his hands on his jeans. And you? Megan hesitated. That's complicated. She stepped closer to Atlas and crouched, not touching him yet. Atlas watched her carefully. His body remained angled slightly toward Jack, protective even now. They lost a handler last year, she said quietly. Explosive breach. Domestic call turned ambush. Jack's jaw tightened. Atlas was assigned to Deputy Aaron Mills, she continued. Aaron was 38, married, 2 kids. Atlas was in the entry stack when it happened. Jack looked down at the dog. He survived, Megan said. Mills didn't. Silence pressed in. Atlas shifted 1 step back toward Jack. After that, Megan went on, Atlas became difficult to place. High drive, overprotective. Wouldn't separate cleanly. Would sit at Mills' old locker for hours. Jack felt the words settle like stones. And now? He asked. Now they think putting him back in the field is the right call. Jack nodded once. He walked toward the porch railing, putting space between himself and both of them. He had begun doing that more since the break-in, sleeping in the chair instead of the couch where Atlas preferred to lie near his boots, keeping commands sharp and distant, no hand resting on fur longer than necessary. No quiet murmurs by the fire. Atlas noticed. He always noticed. Megan stood, watching the subtle withdrawal. You're pulling away, she said. Jack gave a humorless half-smile. He's not mine. Atlas moved. He stepped past Megan and positioned himself directly in front of the cabin door. Not blocking, guarding. The transport kennel door in the SUV clanged lightly in the wind. Atlas didn't look at it. Megan exhaled slowly. Jack. He belongs to the unit, Jack said. That's the reality. Atlas turned his head slightly toward Jack, then back toward the trees, as if waiting for instruction. Megan studied them both. You know he hasn't eaten unless you're in the room. Jack didn't respond. You know he hasn't left the porch perimeter since the arrest. Still nothing. And you know he refused to load into my vehicle this morning. Jack's eyes flicked to her. He jumped out twice, Megan said calmly, sat back on the porch. Atlas's tail gave a single low sweep against the wood. Jack looked away first. Don't make this about me, he muttered. Megan stepped closer, voice softening. It already is. Down in town, news had begun to circulate. Iron Creek wasn't large. Stories traveled faster than snowplows. The break-in, the flare, the arrests. Jack's name had resurfaced in conversations that once spoke of him only in past tense. Mrs. Donnelly from the hardware store had sent a thermos up with Deputy Mills that morning. A note taped to it read, "Thank you for protecting our town again." Jack hadn't opened it. Hero wasn't a word he accepted easily. Unit says Atlas could qualify for early retirement, Megan continued. Light strain, documented trauma history. It's an option. Jack looked back at the dog. Atlas remained planted in front of the door. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't whining. He was choosing. You're telling me he can walk away, Jack said quietly. I'm telling you he doesn't have to go back if we don't clear him. Jack's chest tightened. Why are you pushing this? He asked. Megan met his gaze without flinching. Because I grew up around Ranger. The name landed like a quiet echo. He was the first canine I ever trained alongside, she said. I was 19. Ranger used to steal my gloves when I left them on the tailgate. He'd sit there daring me to chase him. Jack's throat constricted. I remember the day he died, Megan continued, voice steady but lower now. You carried him out of that alley. Atlas shifted slightly closer to Jack's leg. He wasn't just a dog, she said, and neither is this one. Jack exhaled slowly. He'll die on the job, Jack muttered. Maybe, Megan replied honestly. Or maybe he'll sit on a porch for the next 8 years and bark at snow. Atlas glanced up at Jack. The sun had moved higher, casting long white glare across the ridge. The town below seemed smaller from here. Jack walked toward Atlas and crouched. For a long moment, he didn't touch him. You're not Ranger, he said softly. Atlas blinked once. But you stood your ground, Jack continued. You held perimeter. The dog's ears flicked. Jack reached out slowly and rested his hand on Atlas's neck. Not command, not restraint. Connection. Atlas leaned, just slightly, into the pressure. Megan watched without interrupting. I can't lose another one, Jack admitted finally. Megan's voice gentled. You already did. Jack closed his eyes briefly. And he already did, she added. Atlas's breathing slowed under Jack's hand. They stayed like that for several seconds. Then Megan stepped back toward the SUV and opened the kennel door fully. Atlas, she called once. The dog's head lifted. He looked at the vehicle, then at Jack. Jack stood slowly. He didn't give a command. He didn't say stay. He didn't say go. Atlas took 3 steps toward the SUV, stopped, turned, walked back to the porch, sat, facing the tree line. Megan waited. Atlas, she called again. Nothing. The dog's posture remained forward, vigilant, choosing post, choosing cabin, choosing him. Jack felt something inside his chest loosen. Not fear, not grief. Permission. Megan walked back up the porch steps and closed the kennel door gently. I'll file for retirement review, she said quietly. Jack nodded once. He'll need vet clearance and paperwork, she continued, but it can be done. Atlas remained seated, but his tail tapped the wood once. Megan adjusted her hat. The town's going to want to shake your hand, she added lightly. Jack grimaced faintly. Get used to it. She paused at the top of the steps. You're not the only one who lost a partner. Jack looked down at Atlas. Neither is he, Megan said. Then she descended to her SUV and drove away. The ridge returned to stillness. Atlas rose and moved back to his place beside the door. Jack remained standing for a moment longer, watching the road disappear into the trees. Finally, he exhaled. All right, he murmured. Atlas's ears perked. We'll see what retirement looks like. The dog stepped closer. Not exuberant, not playful, just present. Jack rested his hand on Atlas's head once more. Not briefly this time, and Atlas stayed. The snow began to melt 3 days after Megan drove down the ridge with the empty kennel in her SUV. Not all at once. Iron Creek never changed that easily, but in slow fractures along the tree line where sunlight lingered longest. Icicles thinned, dripped, broke. The forest shifted from white silence to muted brown and green, the promise of thaw settling into the earth. Jack stood inside the cabin with a manila envelope in his hand. Atlas watched him from near the hearth. The envelope contained retirement clearance forms, veterinary evaluations, and an official transfer of custodial responsibility from Iron Creek PD to a civilian handler, Jack Callahan. The paperwork felt heavier than it should have. Atlas had passed medical review with minimal restrictions. Early retirement approved under trauma consideration. Recommendation: structured routine, controlled environment, experienced handler. Jack read that last line twice. Experienced handler. He walked to the old oak table and signed his name slowly, deliberately. The pen scratched loud in the quiet cabin. When he finished, he exhaled. Not relief, not fear. Something steadier. "It's official," he muttered. Atlas lifted his head. Jack crossed the room and crouched in front of him. "You don't answer to the department anymore," he said quietly. "You answer to me." Atlas's ears angled forward. Jack hesitated only a second before adding, "But I'm not calling you Atlas every time." The dog's gaze remained fixed. Jack studied him, the thick black and tan coat, now regaining sheen after proper rest, the strong shoulders that still carried tension, the amber eyes that missed nothing. He was younger than Ranger had been when he died, 4, maybe 5, still powerful, but carrying memory in his posture. "I need something that fits this place," Jack said. Atlas blinked. "Guard." The word settled into the room, not shouted, not commanded, given. Atlas tilted his head slightly. Jack repeated it softly. "Guard." The dog's tail thumped once against the wooden floor. Jack nodded. "Yeah, that works." From that morning forward, routine formed like frost patterns. Simple, structured, dependable. They rose before sunrise. Jack brewed black coffee while Guard waited near the back door, no longer rigid, but alert. After coffee, they stepped into the tree line together, boots crunching lightly against thinning snow. Not patrol in the official sense, not enforcement, just presence. They walked the ridge in widening circles, mapping scent, listening to wind, noting tracks of deer and fox. Guard moved slightly ahead, but always within sightline. No leash, no need. 2 former officers keeping watch. The first time they passed the spot where Ranger had once trained on winter search drills, Jack slowed. The memory no longer struck like a blow. It came quieter now, like an old scar reacting to weather. Guard paused beside him. Jack looked at the clearing. "I used to think avoiding this place meant moving on," he said. Guard's nose brushed his gloved hand. Jack exhaled and stepped forward. Inside the cabin later that afternoon, Jack did something he hadn't done in 5 years. He retrieved a small wooden frame from a drawer beneath the kitchen counter. Dust clung to its edges. The photograph inside showed a younger Jack in uniform, arms slung over Ranger's shoulders. The dog's ears were high, expression sharp, proud. Jack stood staring at it for a long time. Guard lay on the rug nearby, head resting on paws. "You deserve the wall," Jack murmured. He walked to the empty space above the mantel, where a nail had once hung but been removed after Ranger's death. He hammered a new one in carefully and placed the frame back in its rightful place. He stepped back. Guard rose and approached the fireplace. Instead of standing at the door, as he had every night since arriving, he circled once and lay down beside the hearth, facing inward. Not guarding the threshold, guarding the home. Jack noticed immediately. "You're off perimeter," he said quietly. Guard closed his eyes. A week later, Sheriff Megan Foster climbed the ridge again, this time carrying no kennel, no urgency. She wore jeans beneath her department jacket, hair loose against the wind. She knocked once before entering. Guard lifted his head but did not rise. "Comfortable," Megan observed with a faint smile. Jack poured her coffee without asking. "You're adjusting," she said, watching Guard stretch lazily before settling again. "He's adjusting," Jack corrected. Megan leaned against the counter. Town council approved funding. For what? Retired canine support program. Medical coverage, feed stipends, volunteer network. Iron Creek's first official canine retirement initiative. Jack blinked. That was quick. Megan shrugged lightly. People saw what happened on that ridge. They remember Ranger. They don't want to forget the dogs who stand between them and chaos. Guard's ears twitched at the word chaos, but remained relaxed. You'll be listed as primary consultant, Megan added. Jack raised an eyebrow. Consultant? Training advisory, screening handlers, helping transition active canines into retirement. Jack looked down at Guard. Seems you're not the only one retiring, Megan said. Jack huffed softly. I never retired. She smiled. You did. You just didn't know it. That same afternoon, a knock sounded again, lighter, hesitant. When Jack opened the door, he found a young officer standing on the porch. Deputy Connor Hale, 28, lean build, sandy hair cut short, uniform pressed too sharply for someone still new to wearing it comfortably. His eyes carried the stiff eagerness of someone determined not to fail. Sir, Connor said, standing straighter than necessary. Sheriff said I could come observe. Observe what? Jack asked. Canine retirement handling. I've been assigned to incoming canine unit next quarter. Jack studied him. Connor's posture reminded him of himself decades ago. Tight, rigid, too concerned with proving worth. Come in, Jack said. Guard rose slowly, assessing. Connor froze for half a second. Relax, Jack muttered. He won't move unless I say. Guard approached Connor calmly, sniffed once, then stepped back. Connor exhaled. He's bigger up close, he admitted. Confidence isn't volume, Jack replied. It's stillness. Connor nodded. Over the next weeks, the Ridge cabin became something new. Not a bunker, not a memory vault, a classroom. Jack demonstrated quiet commands, reinforcement without aggression, respect over dominance. Guard performed with steady precision, no flashy tricks, no unnecessary movement. Megan visited twice weekly under the pretense of checking progress, though Jack noticed she stayed longer each time. Sometimes she brought homemade cornbread. Sometimes she brought departmental updates. Once she brought a faded chew toy that had belonged to Ranger, found in storage at the station. Jack accepted it silently. That evening, he placed it beside Guard. The dog sniffed it carefully, then rested his chin over it. No tension, no confusion, just acknowledgement. As spring pressed deeper into Iron Creek, the forest shifted from brittle to alive. Snow retreated to shaded ravines. Streams ran louder. Birds returned. One morning, Jack and Guard paused at the ridge overlook. Sunlight broke across the valley in long golden bands. Jack rested his hand on Guard's neck. You staying inside these days, he said lightly. Guard's tail thumped once. The dog no longer slept by the door. He no longer braced at every passing gust of wind. He lay by the hearth, close enough to warmth to feel safe. Jack didn't flinch at the memory of Ranger anymore. He didn't avoid the photograph. He didn't avoid the clearing. And he didn't avoid attachment. Back at the cabin that afternoon, Megan stopped by again. Council's naming the program after Ranger, she said casually. Jack stiffened slightly. Ranger Initiative, for retired canines. Guard glanced up at the name. Jack swallowed. That's fine, he said. Megan watched him carefully. It's more than fine. Guard stretched beside the fire, rolling briefly onto his side before settling. Jack sank into his chair. You know, he said after a long pause, I used to think watch meant staying ready for the next threat. Megan waited. Now I think it means staying present. Guard shifted closer to his boots. The fire crackled softly. Outside, Iron Creek moved through spring under open sky. Inside the cabin, two veterans, one man, one dog, rested between patrols that no longer required fear. Guard's breathing slowed into sleep, and Jack did not feel alone. Sometimes the hardest doors to open are not made of wood or steel. They are the ones we build inside ourselves. Jack believed he was protecting his heart by keeping it closed. He thought that if he never allowed himself to care again, he would never have to feel that loss again. But life does not work that way. When we shut out pain, we also shut out healing. When we avoid love, we avoid the very thing that makes us whole. Atlas did not come to the cabin by accident. He came wounded, loyal, and searching for something familiar, just like Jack. Two veterans, each carrying memories of partners they could not save. What changed their story was not bravery in a gunfight or strength in a storm. It was a simple choice, to open the door, to stay, to trust again. In our daily lives, we all face moments like that. We lose people, we lose dreams, we lose parts of ourselves we thought we could never replace. And after enough loss, it feels safer to withdraw, to keep distance, to tell ourselves we are better off alone. But sometimes, the very thing we fear will break us is the thing sent to restore us. Healing rarely arrives loudly. It shows up quietly. A knock at the door, a second chance, a new responsibility, a relationship we did not expect. Jack learned that watch does not only mean guarding against danger, it means being present for what matters. It means standing beside someone, human or animal, and saying, "I will not walk away this time." Maybe there is something in your life you have been avoiding because you are afraid of being hurt again. Maybe there is a door you need to open, a conversation you need to have, a chance you need to take. Love is always a risk, but it is also the only thing that turns survival into living. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need a reminder that it is never too late to begin again. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from. Have you ever been given a second chance when you least expected it? If you believe that loyalty still matters, that healing is possible, and that no one should face their battles alone, consider subscribing to the channel and joining this community. There are more stories of hope, courage, and redemption waiting to be told. May God bless your home and keep you safe through every storm. May He give you the courage to open your heart when fear tells you to close it. May He send faithful companions to walk beside you in every season of your life. And may peace rest in your house tonight. If you receive this blessing, write Amen in the comments below. Sometimes healing does not arrive as a grand miracle. Sometimes it arrives quietly, standing at your door when you least expect it. Jack believed that closing his heart would protect him from ever feeling that kind of loss again. Many of us do the same. We lose someone. We fail at something. We carry regret. And instead of risking more pain, we build walls. We tell ourselves we are stronger alone. But life has a way of sending us another chance. Atlas did not erase Jack's past. He did not replace Ranger. What he did was remind Jack that love is not something we get only once. Loyalty is not limited to one chapter of our lives, and purpose does not end just because we are wounded. In our everyday lives, we all face storms. Some are loud and public, others are quiet and private. We may feel lost, tired, or afraid to open the door again. But sometimes, the very thing we fear will hurt us is the thing sent to restore us. Second chances do not mean forgetting the past. They mean honoring it while choosing to move forward. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who may need a reminder that it is never too late to begin again. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from, and what part of the story spoke to you most. If you believe that loyalty still matters, that healing is possible, and that no one should stand alone in the cold, subscribe to the channel and join this community. There are more stories of courage, faith, and second watches ahead. May God bless you and your home. May He give you strength in every storm and peace in every quiet moment. May He bring faithful people into your life and help you become that steady presence for someone else. If you receive this blessing and believe in second chances, write Amen in the comments below.